The future belongs to the one who sees first.
But how do we act on it?
We move now. Agreed.
Chapter 1. The man who never lost no one at Valecrest Holdings had ever seen Adrien Hale smile. They had seen him dismantle executives with a single sentence. They had seen him close billion-dollar acquisitions without blinking. They had seen him fire a vice president in under 90 seconds, but they had never seen warmth. The media called him the ice strategist. The board called him indispensable. The employees called him something else when he was not around. Untouchable. At 38, Adrien Hale had transformed Valecrest Holdings into one of the most aggressive corporate forces in New York. Energy, tech, private equity, offshore assets. He expanded like a chess player who already knew the final move. And yet, in the glass reflection of his 43rd floor office, there was always something else. Something watchful, something tired. On a grey Monday morning, that reflection shifted because she walked in. Chapter 2. The woman who should not be there. Her name was Eleanor Cruz. She was not supposed to stand in that boardroom, not with her simple navy blazer, not with her calm posture, not with those eyes that did not lower when Adrien looked at her. The board members glanced at one another as she took the seat reserved for the new legal advisor. Adrien did not react outwardly, but he noticed everything. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, no nervous tapping, no overcompensation. Interesting. The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Hale, this is Eleanor Cruz. She will be assisting with the internal restructuring review. Internal restructuring? Adrien asked evenly. Elena answered before the chairman could. Yes, I was brought in to evaluate compliance structures tied to offshore subsidiaries. The room became very quiet. Adrien's gaze sharpened. That was not a random assignment. That was precision. You'll find our compliance systems flawless, he said. Elena met his eyes. I always prefer to confirm that personally. Not defiant, not submissive, professional. The kind of calm that hides either brilliance or danger. He did not yet know which. Chapter 3. Fire Beneath Ice. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena became a quiet presence inside Valecrest. She did not flirt. She did not gossip. She did not attempt alliances. She studied. Financial transfers, shell entities, trust amendments, old merger contracts that predated Adrien's leadership. She worked late. So did he. On the 17th night of her review, she was alone in the archive room when the lights flickered. A shadow moved behind her. You're thorough, Adrien's voice said from the doorway. She did not jump. I was hired to be. He stepped inside. Up close, he was more intimidating, not because of his height or tailored suit, but because of how still he remained. Most powerful men filled silence with dominance. He let silence do the work. You've requested access to files that are not directly linked to your assignment. Yes. Why? She closed the folder slowly. Because restructuring only makes sense when you understand the foundation. A long pause. You think there's something wrong with the foundation? She looked at him then, and something changed. Is there? No one spoke to Adrien Hale like that. There was no accusation in her voice, only curiosity. But curiosity is dangerous in places built on secrets. Chapter 4. The First Crack. The first rumor hit the financial press 3 days later. An anonymous source claimed that Valecrest's renewable energy division was under federal review for irregular cross-border funding. The stock dipped 3% in an hour. The board panicked. Adrien did not. He convened an emergency meeting. We will contain this within 48 hours, he said calmly. But when he returned to his office, he found Elena standing by his window. You knew, he said. She turned slowly. I suspected. You're not surprised? No. He studied her. Did you leak it? Her jaw tightened slightly. If I were going to destroy you, Mr. Hale, I would do it properly. The words hung in the air. Destroy you, not destroy the company. You. His pulse shifted for the first time in years. You think you could? I think you've built something impressive, she said quietly. But I also think you built it on something unstable. And what is that? She stepped closer. Control. The word was almost soft. He had never felt challenged, not intellectually, not emotionally, until now. Chapter 5. Attraction as a weapon. It happened gradually. A glance that lasted half a second too long. A conversation that moved from legal frameworks to philosophy. He discovered she read economic theory for pleasure. She discovered he played piano alone in his penthouse at night. Neither commented on the shift, but tension does not need commentary. One evening, after a 12-hour strategy session, the building emptied. Only 2 lights remained on. His office, her office. He found her reviewing a spreadsheet under dim light. "You should go home," he said. "So should you." He walked in, closed the door. "You're not afraid of me," he observed. She held his gaze. "No." "Why?" "Because men who rely on fear rarely understand what to do with honesty." The air tightened. He stepped closer. "Be careful." "With what?" "Underestimating me." She did not move away. "I don't underestimate you," she said quietly. "I'm trying to understand you." And that was more dangerous than hostility, because understanding dismantles armor. Chapter 6. The secret. She carried Eleanor Cruz was not sent randomly. 5 years earlier, her father had owned a minority stake in a small infrastructure company. Valecrest acquired it aggressively. The deal had been legal, perfectly structured, impeccably timed. Her father lost everything. 3 months later, he suffered a stroke. He never recovered financially or emotionally. Elena studied law after that, not for revenge, for leverage. When she discovered irregularities in the acquisition structure, she followed them. They led to Valecrest, they led to Adrien Hale, and now she was inside. Close enough to see the architecture of his empire, close enough to see the cracks, but something unexpected happened. He was not the monster she imagined. Cold, yes. Ruthless in negotiation, yes, but not cruel, not careless, not corrupt in the obvious way. Which meant one thing. If there was rot, it was deeper. And he might not even know. That complicated everything. Because revenge is simple when the villain is obvious. It becomes unbearable when the truth is layered. Chapter 7. The night. Everything shifted. The Federal Review escalated. Subpoenas were issued. The board turned restless. One director suggested replacing Adrien temporarily to stabilize public perception. The suggestion spread like poison. Elena overheard it first. She had a choice. Stay silent and watch his control fracture, or warn him. She walked into his office after midnight. "They're preparing to vote you out." He looked up slowly. "On what basis?" "Public pressure, investor anxiety." He leaned back. "And why are you telling me this?" She swallowed. "Because the irregularities in the acquisition trail predate you." His expression changed. For the first time, there was genuine surprise. "What are you implying?" "I think someone used Valecrest's structure before you became CEO." A long silence. "Who?" She hesitated. "The previous chairman. His predecessor. A mentor. A man he trusted." The foundation shifted beneath him. "If that's true," he said quietly, "everything I built is standing on someone else's manipulation." "Yes. And you have proof." "Almost." He stood. For the first time since she met him, he did not look invincible. He looked human. "If you expose this," he said, "the board will fracture. Investors will panic." "I know. And you will destroy me in the process." She met his eyes. "I never wanted to destroy you." The confession hovered between them. He stepped closer. "Then what do you want?" She exhaled. "The truth. And perhaps something else. Something far more dangerous. Him." Chapter 8. The Mentor's Shadow. Adrien did not sleep that night. After Eleanor left his office, he remained standing by the window, Manhattan glittering below like a kingdom he wasn't sure he truly owned. Marcus Whitmore, former chairman, architect of Valecrest's early expansion, the man who had handpicked Adrien as successor. Marcus had retired gracefully 3 years earlier, citing health and confidence in the next generation. Adrien had believed him. Now doubt crept in like smoke under a locked door. By 6 a.m., Adrien had accessed private archival records, internal memos, acquisition trails from 7 years prior. And there it was, a pattern. Aggressive acquisitions targeting mid-sized infrastructure firms, complex offshore layers, profit consolidation through holding entities Marcus had personally approved. Veilocrest had not begun as a machine under Adrien. It had begun as a weapon under Marcus. Adrien closed his eyes. Everything he built afterward had been clean, transparent, strategically ruthless but legal. But the foundation beneath him, compromised. And Elena had seen it first. Chapter 9. Lines that Blur. Elena stood in her apartment, staring at the evidence she had compiled. Digital trails, transaction layering, trust modifications. She could expose everything within days. Her father's silence echoed in her memory, but Adrien's face from the night before intruded. Not the cold CEO. The man realizing he might have inherited corruption. That wasn't the narrative she had prepared herself for. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She froze. "Miss Cruz," a male voice said calmly. "You've been very busy." "Who is this?" A concerned observer. Her pulse sharpened. "You're digging into Veilocrest's early structures. That can be dangerous." "Dangerous for who?" A soft chuckle. "For everyone." The line disconnected. She stood motionless. She wasn't the only one watching. Chapter 10. The vote. The boardroom was colder than usual. 12 members, one agenda item, temporary removal of Adrien Hale as CEO pending investigation. The chairman spoke cautiously. "This is procedural." Adrien sat still. Eleanor observed from the side wall, technically present as legal counsel. The vote began. One by one, 6 in favor, 5 against, 1 undecided. The final vote belonged to Daniel Reed, senior director and longtime ally of Marcus Whitmore. Daniel adjusted his glasses. "This instability concerns me," he said, "but removing Mr. Hale without proof of wrongdoing may create greater chaos." A pause. "My vote is against removal." 6 to 6. Deadlocked. The motion failed. The board dispersed in tense silence. Adrien remained seated. Elena approached slowly. "That was too close," she said. "Yes, you're not safe." He looked at her. "Neither are you." Chapter 11. Attraction under pressure. Crisis compresses space between people. That evening, Adrien invited her to his penthouse, not as CEO. As a man who needed clarity, she almost refused, but she went. The elevator opened to a view of the skyline bathed in amber dusk. The apartment was minimalist, elegant, impersonal. Except for one thing. A grand piano. "You play?" she asked quietly. "Only when no one is listening." He poured 2 glasses of wine. They stood across from each other, tension vibrating like static. "Why did you warn me?" he asked. "You deserve to know if your empire is a lie." "That's not what I meant." Silence. She looked at him. "Because I don't think you're the villain I came here to expose." The admission shifted the air. He stepped closer. "And if I am? Then I'll destroy you." Her honesty did not scare him. It ignited something. He touched her hand lightly. Electric. A warning and a promise. "This ends badly," he murmured. "Most powerful things do." And then he kissed her. Not soft, not hesitant, but controlled intensity breaking at the edges. For the first time in years, Adrien Hale felt out of control, and he did not hate it. Chapter 12. The Trap. 2 days later, federal investigators announced a formal probe into Veilocrest's historical acquisition practices. Stock plunged 12%. Media headlines were brutal. Anonymous leaks suggested internal complicity. Elena reviewed the documents released to the press. Her stomach tightened. Some of the data looked altered. Fabricated timestamps, modified transfer routes. Someone was reframing the narrative, making it appear as if Adrien personally approved structures that predated him. He was being positioned as the fall guy. She stormed into his office. "This isn't organic," she said. He was already aware. "I know. They're redirecting blame toward you." "Who?" He didn't answer immediately. "Daniel Reed," he said finally. "The undecided vote?" He worked closely with Marcus. He controls several private voting blocks. Elena's pulse quickened. So Marcus builds the structure. Daniel inherits the leverage. And I become the shield. She looked at him. You trusted them. Yes. And now? Now I trust very little. Their eyes locked, except her. He still trusted her, and that terrified him more than the investigation. Chapter 13. Truth at a Cost. Elena compiled the final piece of evidence, an encrypted authorization signature linking Marcus and Daniel to offshore restructuring agreements. If she released it publicly, Valecrest would implode temporarily, but Adrien would be cleared. If she withheld it, Daniel could continue manipulating events quietly. She drove to Adrien's penthouse that night. Rain streaked across the windows. He opened the door before she knocked. You have something, he said. Yes. She placed the tablet on the table. This proves you weren't involved. But exposing it means open war. Investors panic, share price collapse, possible criminal charges for Marcus and Daniel. And you? My name will be attached. And your father. She swallowed. He'll finally have justice. Silence. He stepped closer. If you release this, you protect me. Yes. And destroy the empire I rebuilt. Yes. The truth was heavy. What do you want me to choose? He asked quietly. She looked at him, eyes shining but steady. I want you to choose who you are. Not who the board made you. Not who Marcus shaped you to be. Who you are. Chapter 14. The decision. The emergency press conference was scheduled for 9 a.m. Adrien stood behind the podium. Reporters packed the room. Elena stood at the back, heart pounding. He could deny everything. Blame past management without proof. Buy time. Instead, he spoke clearly. Valecrest Holdings will fully cooperate with federal investigators. Additionally, we are submitting internal documentation revealing structural decisions made prior to my tenure as CEO. Murmurs erupted. Daniel Reed's face went pale. Adrien continued. I built this company on discipline and ambition. But if that foundation contains corruption, it will be exposed. He did not look at Eleanor, but she felt the choice. He chose truth over control, over stability, over ego. By noon, warrants were issued for Marcus Whitmore and Daniel Reed. Stock plummeted again. Analysts predicted disaster. But something unexpected happened. Investors praised transparency. Within 48 hours, market sentiment shifted. Adrien's approval surged. He had not protected power. He had protected integrity. Chapter 15. The woman who could destroy him. 3 weeks later, the storm settled. Valecrest stabilized. The board restructured. Adrien retained his position, stronger than before. Eleanor stood once more in his office. You could have lost everything, she said. I almost did. And if I hadn't brought you the evidence, he stepped closer, then I would have deserved to lose it. Silence. You came here to destroy me, he said softly. I know. And now? She looked at him, vulnerability flickering. Now, I don't want to. He touched her face gently. You still could. Yes, that's what makes it real. Power built on fear collapses. Power built on truth evolves. But love is the most destabilizing force of all. He kissed her again, slower this time. Not conquest, choice. Everyone had feared the cold CEO, but the only thing that ever truly threatened him was the woman who refused to fear him. Chapter 16. The man who still had moves. Marcus Whitmore did not look broken. Even in a private federal holding facility, even stripped of tailored suits and polished boardrooms, he carried himself like a man temporarily inconvenienced. Temporary. That was the word he repeated to himself. His lawyer slid a folder across the metal table. The case is strong, she said quietly. Financial trails, encrypted authorizations, testimony from Reed. Marcus smiled faintly. Reed was always weak. You're facing multiple federal charges. And Adrien Hale, Marcus asked calmly, publicly praised for transparency. A flicker passed through Marcus's eyes. So he chose exposure. Yes. Marcus leaned back. Good. His lawyer frowned. Good? He believes he cut the infection out. He folded his hands, but he still lives inside the body. Chapter 17. Fractures of Intimacy. Weeks passed. Adrien and Elena's relationship unfolded carefully, like two strategists learning vulnerability instead of leverage. They did not announce anything publicly. They did not parade affection through corridors, but employees noticed the shift. Adrien listened more, spoke less, considered consequences beyond profit. Elena had not softened him. She had refined him. One evening, as they sat on the penthouse balcony overlooking the river, Eleanor traced circles on the rim of her glass. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd released everything without telling you?" He answered without hesitation, "I would have survived. That's not what I meant." He turned to her. "You're asking if I would hate you?" "Yes." A pause. "I would respect you." She studied him. And privately, he was honest. "I don't know. Truth, not comfort." That was their language. Chapter 18. The Leak. 3 months after Marcus' arrest, an encrypted data package was sent anonymously to major financial journalists. Subject line, Valecrest Phase 2. Inside were documents no one had seen. Forward-looking acquisition blueprints, energy monopolization strategies, political influence projections, all signed with Adrien Hale's digital authorization. The timestamps were current. The strategy was ruthless. And it was real. News outlets exploded within hours. The narrative shifted again. Was Adrien ever truly reformed, or had he simply learned to expose old corruption while building new dominance? Elena stared at the files in disbelief. "These are internal strategic drafts," she said. "Yes," Adrien replied evenly. "Why do they exist?" "Because competitors don't play gently." She stepped back. "This isn't illegal, but it's aggressive to the point of destabilizing entire markets." "That's how markets work." Her heart sank slightly. "I thought we were building something different." He walked toward her. "We are." "Are we?" The room grew heavy. Marcus might be behind bars, but the ideology that shaped Valecrest was still alive. Inside, Adrien. Chapter 19. The Visit. Marcus Whitmore received a visitor. Not a lawyer, not family. Eleanor Cruz. The prison guard left them alone. Marcus smiled slowly. "You must be the woman." "I'm not here for theatrics. You're here because you're beginning to understand." She stayed silent. "Adrien believes he's morally superior," Marcus continued, "but he learned from me. Strategy, leverage, dominance. He chose transparency." Marcus chuckled. "When it benefited him." Her jaw tightened. "You built exploitation into the foundation." "Yes." "And he kept building. That's what successors do." Marcus leaned closer. "Tell me, Miss Cruz, do you love him?" She did not answer. "That's inconvenient," Marcus murmured. "Why?" "Because eventually you'll have to decide if you love the man or the empire." Chapter 20. Collision. Eleanor confronted Adrien that night. "You knew about Phase 2. "Yes." "And you didn't tell me." "It wasn't finalized." "That's not the point." His voice remained calm. "What is the point?" "The point is that you're still willing to crush competition without hesitation. That's business. At what cost?" He stepped closer. "You think I enjoy dominance for its own sake? I think you don't know how to exist without it." Silence fell like a blade. He had sacrificed reputation to expose corruption, but had he truly changed, or had he simply optimized the machine? "You wanted the truth," he said quietly. "This is it. I don't intend to be weak." "I never asked you to be weak," she replied. "I asked you to be different." Chapter 21. The Offer. A private equity consortium approached Adrien discreetly. They offered to buy a controlling stake in Valecrest at a premium. Condition: Adrien remains CEO. Expansion accelerates. Phase 2 activates fully. Unchecked growth, unlimited capital, global dominance. He sat alone in his office, proposal open before him. Elena entered quietly. "You're considering it?" "Yes. If you accept, you become unstoppable." He looked at her. "And if I decline?" "You choose sustainability over supremacy." He exhaled slowly. "You want me to shrink?" "I want you to decide who you are without war." The city lights flickered outside. Supremacy had defined him, but love had complicated him, and power hates complication. Chapter 22. The choice that changes everything. The board assembled again. Adrien presented the offer. Gasps, excitement, greed barely concealed. He let them react. Then he said calmly, "I decline." Silence slammed into the room. "We will not pursue aggressive monopolization. We will not destabilize markets for rapid expansion." Daniel Reed's replacement stared in disbelief. "You're leaving billions on the table." "Yes." "Why?" Adrien paused. "Because power without restraint becomes the very corruption he once exposed." But he did not say that. Instead, he said, "Because long-term stability outperforms reckless dominance." The vote passed narrowly. The consortium withdrew. Valacrest remained powerful, but no longer predatory. Chapter 23. The Woman Who Could Destroy Him. Months later, Eleanor stood in the same boardroom where she had first met him. She was no longer an external advisor. She was head of ethical oversight. A new division Adrien created. Some called it weakness, others called it evolution. Adrien entered the room. Their eyes met. Private understanding passed between them. He walked to the head of the table. "Let's begin." The meeting flowed with intensity, but different now, measured, calculated, strategic without cruelty. Afterward, in his office, he pulled her close. "You changed the architecture," he murmured. "No," she said softly. "You did." He smiled faintly. A rare, unguarded smile. Everyone had feared the cold CEO. They still did. But now for a different reason. Not because he ruled without conscience, but because he ruled with control over himself. And the only person who ever truly had the power to destroy him was the woman who taught him restraint. The next morning, Elena's name was everywhere. Not as a hero, not as an executive, but as a suspect. The story spread with the speed of a silent explosion. Financial irregularities linked to CEO's close associate. One image showed her leaving the company building. Another captured her getting into Adrien's car. A third froze her in a frame where she appeared tense. Perfect manipulation. Adrien walked into the boardroom as if the world were still under control. It wasn't. The oval table was full, directors, investors, lawyers, and in the center a dossier. "You've compromised this company, Adrien," one board member said, "and you did it for her." The word "her" was spoken like a disease. Adrien opened the file. Printed pages, bank transfers, digital authorizations, signed with Elena's login. He didn't blink, but something cracked inside him, because this wasn't a simple attack. It was a strategic execution. "This is fabricated," he said calmly. "Then prove it." Eleanor watched everything from her apartment. She couldn't go to the office. Her access had been blocked. Her name was under internal investigation. Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages, news alerts, links. She turned it off. Then someone knocked on the door. 3 firm knocks. When she opened it, she found an envelope on the floor. No sender. Inside, only one printed sentence. "Walk away from him, or he falls." The paper trembled in her hands. They weren't just attacking the company. They were testing loyalty. Back in the boardroom, a vote was proposed. Temporary removal of the CEO pending investigation. It was an elegant move. Legal. Clean. Adrien studied every face. Some avoided his gaze. Others looked neutral in a way that felt too rehearsed. But something else was happening. He sensed pressure from outside. Invisible investors. Recently acquired funds. Someone was buying influence. Fast. "If I step down," he said calmly, "this company loses more than leadership. It loses its spine." "Or maybe it gains ethics," someone replied. Silence. The vote was postponed until the end of the day, but the message was clear. He was surrounded. Elena decided not to run. She wouldn't step back. She wouldn't obey the threat. Instead, she did what she always did when the world tried to crush her. She investigated. She had backups, records, local copies of internal reports. And something was wrong. The transfers labeled as fraud had been made from an internal IP inside the company. At a time when she was in a recorded meeting, someone had used her login, but not her presence. She traced deeper, and then she found something bigger, a pattern. Stock acquisitions over the last weeks, small, fragmented, but consistent, controlled by a newly created holding company. The name was generic, but the registered address, it traced back to a building that once belonged to Adrien's family, not to him, to his father. Adrien received her message at 2:17 p.m. "I think your father is buying the company from the inside." He read it 3 times. He didn't answer immediately. Because if it was true, then this wasn't just corporate sabotage, it was family war. He left the boardroom mid-discussion, called her. "Say that again," she explained. Details, numbers, dates. On the other end, his silence was heavy. "He warned me once," Adrien finally said. "He said if I ever let emotion interfere with strategy, he would remind me who built this empire." And? I thought it was a metaphor. At 4 p.m., Adrien went to his father's house. The mansion was imposing, old. It smelled like tradition and inherited power. Richard Hale received him in the study, not surprised, as if he had been waiting. "You look tired, son. Are you buying my board?" Richard smiled faintly. "I am protecting the legacy. By destroying me. By correcting you." Silence. "She is your weakness," Richard continued. "Markets smell weakness." Adrien stepped closer to the desk. "You framed her. I exposed what you refused to see. You falsified evidence." Richard did not deny it. "Love is a liability in leadership." "No," Adrien said firmly. "Fear is." For the first time, there was real tension between them. "Step down voluntarily," Richard said. "Blame stress, blame overwork, marry someone appropriate, fix this." Adrien let out a quiet laugh. "You're afraid of her." "I am afraid of what she makes you." At 6 p.m., the board reconvened for the final vote. Eleanor appeared, even with her access blocked, even under investigation. She entered the room like a contained storm. Every head turned. Adrien stood immediately. "She shouldn't be here," someone protested. "She absolutely should," Adrien replied. Elena plugged a flash drive into the system. "If you're voting on ethics," she said steadily, "you deserve the truth." She displayed the IP logs, the recorded meeting proving her presence elsewhere, the fragmented stock purchases tied to the holding connected to Richard Hale. The silence that followed was thick. This wasn't just scandal, it was internal betrayal. Richard appeared on the video call, watching, expressionless. "This is a personal conflict," a board member tried to argue. "No," Elena answered. "This is a hostile takeover disguised as moral concern." Adrien looked at her with something beyond love, pride, deep admiration. The vote was suspended. An independent investigation was announced. The removal was cancelled. For now. That night, at the top of the company building, beneath the city lights, Adrien held Eleanor's face in his hands. "You could have walked away. So could you. I almost did." "I know." They stood there. No audience, no board, no market. Just 2 people who refused to retreat. But the war wasn't over. Because inside the dark study of the mansion, Richard made a call. Prepare Phase 2. The threat was no longer just corporate. It was personal. Documents would leak. Pasts would be exposed. Secrets would be excavated. And Elena still didn't know that a piece of her own history was about to be weaponized against her. An old truth, buried, dangerous. The game had only changed levels, and the coldest man in the city was no longer untouchable. He was in love, and that made him both invincible and vulnerable. Phase 2 began at dawn, not with explosions, with whispers. By 8:12 a.m., a confidential memo leaked to 3 major financial journalists. By 9:03 it was online. Internal sources suggest CEO concealed conflict of interest. The article did not accuse Adrien of fraud. It suggested emotional impairment, poor judgment, compromised leadership due to a romantic entanglement with a subordinate, carefully written, legally insulated, strategically poisonous. Elena read it in silence. Adrien didn't. He already knew. "This is reputational erosion," he said calmly, watching the city from his office window. "He's not attacking the fortress. He's weakening the foundation. By turning me into the crack in the wall." He turned toward her. "You're not the crack. Then what am I?" He walked closer. "The reason I refuse to surrender." That would have sounded romantic under different circumstances. Now it felt like a vow made before battle. At 10:30 a.m., the independent audit team confirmed something explosive. The legacy override system used to frame Elena had been activated remotely from a private server registered under a shell company. That shell company had financial ties to Richard Hale, indirect, layered, but traceable. The evidence wasn't yet public, but it was real. Adrien leaned back in his chair. "If this goes public, it destroys him." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. "And if it doesn't, it destroys us." Because accusing the founder meant destabilizing the company's stock. Investors would panic, competitors would circle. Richard was betting that Adrien would never risk collapse to expose him, a father wagering against his son's conscience. That afternoon, Elena received a call from a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it. She answered. "Miss Navarro?" "Yes. This is attorney Miguel Serrano. I represented your mother 18 years ago." Her heart stopped for a fraction of a second. "I wasn't aware she had representation." "She did. Briefly." "For what?" Silence lingered on the other end. "For refusing to testify." Eleanor sat down slowly. "Testify about what?" "The internal restructuring of the bank before its collapse." Her fingers tightened around the phone. "And Richard Hale's involvement." The room seemed to tilt. "That's impossible." "It isn't." Adrien found her 15 minutes later, sitting motionless in the conference room. "What happened?" she told him. Every word felt heavier than the last. Richard hadn't just known her mother. He had been involved in the restructuring that preceded the bank's collapse, a restructuring that shifted liability away from key investors before bankruptcy was declared. Investors like the Hale Family Trust. Adrien listened without interrupting. When she finished, his voice was very quiet. "If that's true, he protected our assets while others lost everything." "Yes? And your mother knew?" "Yes. And she signed a silence agreement." "Yes." Silence pressed in. The war had deep roots, and those roots were tangled in both their histories. That night, Adrien drove alone to the estate again. No announcement, no confrontation rehearsed. He entered the study without waiting to be invited. Richard looked up from his desk. "You're emotional," Richard observed. "That's dangerous. You dismantled a bank. I repositioned exposure. Families lost everything. Markets correct weakness. And Elena's mother?" Richard's gaze sharpened slightly. "She was collateral." The word landed like a blade. Adrien stepped closer. "You manipulated liability, secured our trust's assets, and let the collapse destroy small investors." Richard's expression did not change. "That is leadership." "No," Adrien said coldly. "That is predation." For the first time, something flickered in Richard's eyes. Disapproval. "You think love makes you stronger," Richard said. "It makes you impulsive. You think fear makes you powerful. It makes you small." Richard stood slowly. "If you expose me, you expose yourself. The board will not tolerate instability at the top." "If I stay silent," Adrien replied, "I become you." The silence between them felt final. The next morning, Phase 2 escalated again. A private investigative firm began contacting former employees of Hale Industries, digging, probing, offering incentives for testimony. Someone was preparing a contingency narrative. If Adrien attacked publicly, counter-accusations would surface. Allegations, rumors, manufactured doubt. Elena realized something terrifying. "This isn't just about control," she whispered. "He's training you." Adrien looked at her. "For what?" "For succession by elimination." Richard wasn't trying to remove Adrien. He was testing whether Adrien was ruthless enough to inherit the empire fully. If Adrien destroyed him, he proved himself worthy. If he hesitated, he proved himself weak. It was a psychological crucible, a father forging steel through fire, but Adrien was no longer alone in it. That evening, Elena made a decision. "I'm going public," she said. Adrien's head snapped toward her. "No. Yes. This will become personal warfare." "It already is." He stepped toward her. "They will tear apart your childhood, your mother, every mistake you've ever made. I know. And you're willing to endure that?" Her eyes held steady. "I survived losing everything once. I won't survive watching you become him." That hit deeper than any accusation. He reached for her hand. "Don't sacrifice yourself for me." "I'm not," she said softly. "I'm fighting for us." 2 days later, an exclusive interview aired online. Eleanor sat across from a respected investigative journalist. Calm, measured, unflinching. She did not accuse directly. She presented documentation. She spoke about her mother's silence agreement, about the restructuring, about the pattern of corporate insulation at the expense of small investors. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. The internet ignited. Financial analysts dissected timelines. Legal experts debated liability. Former bank clients began sharing their stories. Richard Hale's name began trending, not as titan but as architect. Stock prices fluctuated violently. Board members panicked. Emergency meetings were called. Adrien stood before them again, this time not defensive, decisive. "I will initiate a full internal historical audit," he said. "No exceptions, including executive legacy decisions." "You're destabilizing us," one director snapped. "No," Adrien replied calmly. "I'm disinfecting us." Late that night, Elena stood alone on the balcony of Adrien's penthouse. The city lights shimmered below. Adrien joined her. "You've changed everything," he said quietly. "So have you." He studied her profile. "I don't know what happens next." "Yes, you do," she replied. He did. Richard would not retreat. Men like him escalated, and escalation meant exposure, personal exposure. There would be something, some secret, some truth still hidden, and they had just forced it into the light. Inside the dark estate, Richard watched the interview replay. He didn't look angry. He looked analytical. Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a final file, thicker than the others, older. On the tab, a single word: contingency. He opened it, and for the first time in years, his expression shifted. Not fear, but calculation sharpened by inevitability. "If you want the truth," he murmured to the empty room, "you'll have all of it." And somewhere between exposure and revelation, between love and legacy, between father and son, the empire trembled. Not because it was attacked from outside, but because its foundation was finally being questioned from within. And this time, no one would walk away untouched. The contingency file was not digital. Richard Hale did not trust clouds. He trusted paper, ink, signatures that could be burned. Inside the folder were 3 sections: financial leverage, political leverage, personal leverage. He flipped directly to the third. Personal leverage was always the most effective. At the top of the stack was a hospital record, sealed, private, supposedly inaccessible, unless you had funded the hospital wing 20 years ago. Richard had. He leaned back slowly. "If you want to dismantle me," he murmured, "you should have checked your own foundations first." The following morning, Eleanor felt it before she saw it. That shift in atmosphere. The way assistants stopped mid-sentence when she passed. The way security looked at her, not with suspicion this time, but curiosity. Her phone buzzed. "Adrien, come to my office, now?" His tone was controlled, too controlled. When she entered, the large screen on the wall was paused on a news broadcast. Her name was on the lower third. She turned slowly. "What is it?" Adrien didn't speak immediately. He pressed play. "Documents obtained late last night suggest that Elena Navarro may have a direct biological connection to the Hale family legacy." The world narrowed. Hospital records from St. Catherine's Medical Center indicate a private sealed amendment to her birth certificate. Her ears rang, raising questions about whether the conflict between CEO Adrien Hale and founder Richard Hale is not only corporate, but familial. The screen froze again. Silence. Eleanor's lips parted, but no sound came out. "That's impossible," she whispered. Adrien stepped closer but didn't touch her yet. "Is it?" Her eyes snapped to his. "My mother never—" He held up a hand gently. "I'm not accusing you, but you're wondering." "Yes." Honesty hung between them like glass. Sharp, transparent, dangerous. Within an hour, the board demanded emergency clarification. If Eleanor was connected by blood to the Hale family, even distantly, it would redefine everything. Nepotism, hidden inheritance, strategic placement. The narrative could flip instantly, from outsider disrupting empire to insider infiltrating it. Elena sat in Adrien's private conference room, staring at a copy of the hospital document. There it was, her birth certificate. Amended. Father's name. Redacted under sealed court order. Date of amendment, 3 months after her birth. Requesting party, legal representative funded by Hale Holdings. Her hands trembled. "I don't understand," she whispered. Adrien's voice was low. "There's one way to." St. Catherine's Medical Center had changed leadership 3 times in 20 years, but archives remained. Paper did not forget. By late afternoon, through legal pressure and strategic influence, Adrien obtained restricted access. They went together. The archive room smelled like dust and antiseptic history, boxes labeled by year. Eleanor's file was retrieved, sealed envelope, court stamped. Her pulse thundered as Adrien handed it to her. "You don't have to open it," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied, "I do." She broke the seal. Inside was a court affidavit, signed by her mother, signed by Richard Hale, and a paternity test result. Probability of biological relation between infant Elena Navarro and Richard Hale, 99.87%. The paper slipped from her fingers. The room felt airless. Adrien didn't move, didn't speak, because there were no rehearsed words for this. She looked at him slowly. "I'm his daughter." Not question. Statement. And that made Adrien her. The implications collided violently. He processed it faster than emotion could catch up. Richard had known. For 28 years. He had paid silence, controlled distance, monitored proximity, and now, when she threatened the empire, he revealed blood, not to claim her, but to destabilize them both. Outside, the media frenzy intensified. Speculation exploded. Secret heir, hidden daughter, corporate Shakespeare. Inside the archive room, Eleanor's breathing grew shallow. "My entire life," she whispered, "I thought we were victims of a financial collapse." Adrien's jaw tightened. "You were. But he protected me." "No," Adrien said firmly. He protected himself. Because if the connection ever surfaced without control, it could damage reputation. So he buried it, not out of love, out of risk management. That night, Adrien confronted Richard for the final time without ambiguity. No pretense, no coded language. "You're her father." Richard did not deny it. He did not confirm it with warmth either. "She was an inconvenience," Richard said calmly. "At the time," Adrien's hands curled into fists, "you let her grow up believing she was nothing. I ensured she grew up independent of scandal. You erased yourself. I minimized liability. The coldness of it was almost inhuman." "She is not a liability," Adrien said. "She is leverage." The words detonated between them. Richard stepped closer. "I revealed the truth because she chose to attack me publicly. Blood deserves clarity. You weaponized paternity. I neutralized emotional interference." Adrien realized something then. Richard had never seen Eleanor as daughter. He saw variables, assets, risks, equations, and now he saw Adrien as compromised. "You love her," Richard observed. "That makes this complicated." Adrien's voice dropped to something lethal. "You don't get to define what she is to me." Richard's eyes sharpened. don't I? Silence, heavy, unstable. If the board believes she is my heir, Richard continued, control shifts, legally, strategically, publicly. Adrien felt the ground beneath the empire fracture. Richard wasn't defending the throne. He was rearranging succession. If Eleanor was acknowledged, she held claim. If she held claim, Adrien's position could weaken, unless he stood beside her, not above. Eleanor sat alone in Adrien's penthouse that night. The city lights blurred through unshed tears. Her entire identity had shifted in 24 hours, not because of love, not because of ambition, because of strategy. She heard Adrien enter. He walked slowly toward her. "I won't let him use this," he said quietly. "You can't control this," she whispered. "No, but I can choose." She looked at him. "And what are you choosing?" He knelt in front of her. Eye level, not CEO, not heir, just a man. "I'm choosing you, not the empire." Her breath caught. "You could lose everything." "So could you." Silence. Then she asked the question neither had dared to speak. "If I'm his daughter, what does that make us?" Adrien didn't flinch. "It makes us two people who refuse to let him dictate the meaning of blood. The world outside would judge, speculate, twist, but inside that room there was only decision and choice and something stronger than legacy." The next morning, Adrien called a press conference, not to deny, not to obscure, but to clarify. He stood before cameras, calm, controlled. Elena Navarro's biological connection to Richard Hale is a private matter that was buried without her knowledge. It will not influence her role nor mine. Hale Industries will undergo structural separation of legacy control effective immediately. Reporters erupted. Structural separation meant dilution of founder voting power. It meant dismantling decades of consolidated authority. It meant revolution. Inside the estate, Richard watched the announcement. For the first time, he did not look analytical. He looked uncertain, because Adrien had not reacted with rage or shame or retreat. He had reacted with transformation, and that was unpredictable. But Richard still had one move left. In the contingency file's final section was something Elena did not know, something her mother had taken to the grave, and something that would not just shake identity. It would test love itself. The war was no longer corporate, no longer familial. It was existential, and the empire was about to split in ways none of them anticipated. The final section of the contingency file was thinner than the others, but heavier. Richard opened it slowly, almost with reverence. Inside was a medical report, not Eleanor's, her mother's. Terminal diagnosis, 3 months before her death. Attached was a signed letter, unsent, addressed to Richard. 2 days after Adrien's press conference, a new document surfaced online, not leaked anonymously, released legally, through Richard's legal team. Eleanor received the alert while sitting in Adrien's office reviewing restructuring proposals. She opened the file and stopped breathing. It was her mother's letter in her handwriting. "My silence was never about money. It was about protection. You promised she would never be dragged into your world." Elena's vision blurred. "Don't if you ever use her name for strategy, I will consider every agreement between us void." The timestamp. 2 weeks before her mother's death. Adrien read over her shoulder. "Protection from what?" he asked quietly. Eleanor scrolled further. Attached was an addendum to the silence agreement. Clause 7. In the event of public acknowledgement of paternity, Elena Navarro would be legally entitled to a dormant trust account established under Hale Holdings. Amount undisclosed. Activation trigger. Identity confirmation in media or court. Eleanor looked at Adrien slowly. He didn't just reveal it to destabilize us. Adrien understood immediately. He triggered the clause. The acknowledgement in the media activated the trust, which meant Elena now legally held financial leverage inside Hale Holdings, whether she wanted it or not. Richard hadn't just exposed blood, he transferred power, but power always came with cost. The board panicked. A hidden heir with legal claim. Markets hated uncertainty. Stock dipped 7% in a single afternoon. Adrien was called into an emergency session again. This time the questions were direct. Did you know about the trust? No. Will she claim it? That is her decision. Do you intend to marry her? Silence filled the room. Not romantic curiosity, strategic calculation, because marriage would consolidate voting rights. Adrien stood. My personal life is not a merger strategy. One board member leaned forward. In this company, everything is. That night, Elena went alone to the old house she grew up in. It had been sold years ago, but the new owners allowed her to retrieve a final box left in storage. Inside were childhood photos, school certificates, her mother's old journals. She opened one, page after page of restrained handwriting, until one entry stood out. He says loving him means staying invisible. I don't know if that's love or fear. Elena closed the journal. Her mother hadn't been weak. She had been cornered. Richard's version of love had always been containment, controlled exposure, strategic affection. And now Elena faced the same question. Was Adrien different, or just a softer evolution of the same system? Meanwhile, Richard requested a private meeting, not with Adrien, with Elena. Against advice, she agreed. The estate felt colder this time, larger, emptier. Richard waited in the same study. He did not stand when she entered. So, he said evenly, you've read the letter. Yes? You were never meant to know. That wasn't your choice. It was your mother's. Eleanor stepped closer. You paid for silence. I paid for stability. You abandoned us. I ensured you were free from scandal. She laughed once, sharp. Free? We lost everything. Temporarily. Her eyes hardened. You don't get to rewrite our survival as inconvenience. Silence. Richard studied her carefully. You are more like me than you think. That's not a compliment. He leaned back. The trust is yours. Claim it. Take your place. I don't want your place. You already occupy it. The words hung in the air, because biologically, legally, strategically, she did. If you marry Adrien, Richard continued, you unify control. The board stabilizes, markets recover. There it was, the real offer, not reconciliation, consolidation. You're proposing a corporate solution to a personal revelation. I am proposing inevitability. Elena stepped back. I am not a chess piece. Richard's expression shifted slightly. No, you are a queen, which makes you the most powerful piece on the board. She felt it then. The seduction of power, not romantic, structural. If she claimed the trust, if she aligned publicly, if she leaned into legacy, she could dismantle him from inside. But at what cost? Adrien waited outside the estate gates. He didn't trust the meeting. When Elena emerged, her face was unreadable. He stepped toward her immediately. What did he say? That I have power. You do. He wants me to use it. For him? For stability. Adrien's jaw tightened. And what do you want? She looked at him for a long moment. I want to know that loving you doesn't mean becoming him. The question struck deeper than accusation. Adrien didn't answer immediately. He considered it, then spoke quietly. If I ever ask you to shrink for strategy, leave me. Silence, honest, unprotected. She stepped closer. And if I ever choose power over us, then I'll fight you for it. A small, unexpected smile touched her lips. That was not Richard's language. That was partnership. 2 days later, Eleanor made her decision. She called a press conference. Alone, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. She stood calm. I acknowledge the biological truth that was recently revealed. I did not know. I did not consent to its timing. And I will not allow it to define my identity. Pause. I will not activate the Vale Trust. Effective immediately, I am transferring all potential claim rights into an independent foundation dedicated to financial transparency and restitution for victims of institutional collapse. The room exploded. She had just weaponized her inheritance against its origin. Inside the estate, Richard watched. This time, he looked almost proud, not because she obeyed, because she played. Adrien watched from his office. And for the first time since this began, he felt something stronger than defense. He felt evolution. But power vacuums are dangerous. The board fractured. Some sided with reform, others with legacy control. Hostile acquisition rumors began surfacing. Competitors sensed instability. The empire trembled again. And in the quiet after her announcement, Elena received one final message from Richard. "You chose correctly. Now let's see if you survive it." Because he hadn't lost. He had adapted. And somewhere inside the financial undercurrents of the market, a new threat was rising. Not father, not son. An external investor who saw the fracture and intended to consume what remained. The war had changed shape again, and this time love would not be enough. The market does not wait for families to resolve their trauma. It hunts weakness. 3 days after Elena's announcement, a name began circulating quietly through financial circles. Adrien Capital, not flashy, not loud, but devastatingly efficient. They specialized in one thing: acquiring fractured empires. By the time Valley Industries' stock stabilized from the trust shockwave, Adrien had already accumulated 11.8% quietly through layered funds. No interviews, no statements, just movement. Adrien saw the report at 6:14 a.m. He didn't curse. He didn't react outwardly. He simply said, "It begins." Elena stepped closer to the screen. They were waiting. Yes, for us to split, and for my father to lose singular control. Richard had centralized power for decades. Adrien had begun decentralizing it. Elena had introduced moral volatility. To Adrien, this wasn't scandal. It was clearance. By noon, Adrien Capital formally requested a board seat. By evening, they demanded an operational review. By the next morning, financial analysts were calling it inevitable. Valley Industries is ripe for restructuring. Restructuring. Such a clean word. It meant layoffs, asset liquidation, brand dilution. It meant dismantling legacy and rebuilding it under colder hands. Adrien called an emergency executive session. The boardroom felt different now, not divided by father and son, divided by fear and survival. "We cannot fight on 3 fronts," one director argued. "Richard, the media, and now Adrien." "We don't need 3 wars," Adrien replied calmly. "We need one strategy." "And what is that?" He looked at Elena, then back at the board. "Unification." Richard arrived at headquarters unannounced. For the first time in weeks, father and son stood on the same side of a threat. Adrien was not sentimental, not legacy-driven. They would strip the company down to pure yield. Richard entered the boardroom slowly. He looked older, not weaker, but aware. "You destabilized the structure," Richard said to Adrien. "You weaponized the foundation," Adrien replied evenly. Richard glanced at Elena. "And you ignited reform." She didn't flinch. "And you created the conditions for collapse." Silence. For the first time, there was no dominance in the room, only reality. Richard exhaled slowly. "Adrien will attempt a hostile takeover within 10 days. "How do you know?" a director asked. "Because that's what I would do." That night, Adrien and Elena stood alone in his office. The city outside shimmered like a battlefield of light. "If we unite shares," Adrien said quietly, "we block Adrien's voting majority." Eleanor understood immediately. "If I activate the trust, you gain voting leverage." "You said this wasn't a merger strategy." "It isn't," he said firmly. "This is defense." Silence lingered. Power now sat in Elena's hands. If she activated the trust, she could combine her shares with Adrien's and outvote Adrien. If she didn't, Adrien could fracture the board completely. "What if your father regains control through this?" she asked. Adrien didn't hesitate. "Then we remove him together." That word again. Together. Not above, not below. Beside. The next morning, Elena went to the foundation lawyers. She amended her previous declaration. The trust would activate temporarily under conditional governance. All dividends redirected to restitution programs. Voting rights restricted to defensive measures only. It was surgical, ethical, strategic, controlled. When the activation became public, The market reacted violently, but not downward, upward. Confidence returned in sharp spikes. Because unity is stronger than scandal, Orion Capital responded within hours. A formal offer, buyout at premium, full executive restructuring, immediate CEO replacement. Replacement, not negotiation. Adrien read the offer twice, then smiled slightly. They're bluffing leverage. Elena studied the numbers. No. They're counting on internal betrayal. She was right. 2 board members had already opened back-channel communication. Fear makes traitors. Richard requested a private meeting again, this time not as adversary, as strategist. In my era, Richard said evenly, we eliminated threats before they matured. And how did that end? Adrien asked calmly. Richard didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Elena. Orion will attempt to isolate you first. Why? She asked. Because you are the moral axis of this narrative. He wasn't wrong. If they discredited her, Adrien looked reckless again, and markets retreat from reckless leaders. 3 nights later it happened. A fabricated scandal, anonymous allegations, financial misconduct tied to the new foundation, implied misallocation of trust funds. The timing was perfect, the documentation almost convincing. Elena stared at the accusations on her screen. They're faster than I expected. Adrien's voice was steel. It's Orion. Richard shook his head slightly. No, it's smarter than that. Both of them looked at him. It's someone inside. The realization landed heavy. This wasn't just external predation, it was internal corrosion. Someone on the board was feeding information and manufacturing narrative. Adrien called a closed-door emergency vote. He didn't accuse, he didn't threaten, he simply projected server logs, encrypted communications between a board member and an Orion affiliate. Silence suffocated the room. Betrayal confirmed. The director attempted denial. Adrien cut him off calmly. You underestimated our unity. Security escorted the director out. Vote recalculated. Orion's leverage weakened. But the damage had already rippled. Eleanor stood alone on the rooftop that night, wind tangling her hair, city humming below. Adrien joined her. Are you tired? He asked quietly. Yes. Do you regret it? She turned to him. No. He stepped closer. This is what loving me costs. She studied his face. This is what building something real costs. Silence. Then she asked softly, if we survive this, then what are we? He didn't hesitate. Not legacy. Not strategy. Choice. The words settled between them like something sacred. Not inherited. Not engineered. Chosen. Inside the estate, Richard watched market updates. Orion's hostile bid was weakening, not collapsing, but slowing. He leaned back slowly. For decades, he believed control meant domination. Now he was watching something different. Control through alignment, through partnership, through transparency weaponized as strength. He wasn't sure whether to resent it or respect it. The final vote approached. Orion needed 51%. Adrien and Eleanor together held 48%. Richard held 9%. He could tip either direction. The empire's fate now rested on the man who built it. The board gathered, tension electric. Orion representatives present, lawyers poised. Richard stood slowly. For the first time in years, his voice carried something unfamiliar. Not authority. Reflection. I built this empire through fear of collapse, he said calmly. My son seeks to rebuild it through exposure of truth. He looked at Elena. You refused containment. Then back at Adrien. You refused imitation. Silence stretched. Then Richard cast his vote, against Orion. The room exhaled collectively. Hostile takeover blocked. For now. Outside, the press declared victory. Inside, nothing felt victorious, only transformed. The empire was no longer a monarchy. It was something uncertain, more fragile, more honest. Adrien walked toward his father after the meeting. Why? He asked quietly. Richard held his gaze. Because you didn't destroy me. It was the closest thing to approval he had ever given. Later that night, Adrien found Elena in the empty boardroom. No cameras, no investors, no war, just quiet. "It's over," he said softly. She shook her head gently. "No." He smiled slightly. "No. It's just no longer about survival." He stepped closer. "And now?" She reached for his hand. "Now we build something that doesn't need war to justify its existence." He looked at her like she had just rewritten his definition of power, and maybe she had. But as the city lights dimmed toward dawn, a notification appeared on Adrien's phone. Short. Encrypted. From an unknown source. Orion was only Phase 1. He stared at the message. Then at Elena. The Empire had survived blood. It had survived betrayal. It had survived acquisition. But someone out there still believed it could be broken. And this time, it wouldn't be about shares. It would be about trust. The message sat on Adrien's screen like a quiet detonation. Orion was only Phase 1. No signature. No traceable origin. Military-grade encryption. Not corporate, not opportunistic, intentional. Eleanor read it twice. "This isn't about acquisition," she said softly. "No," Adrien agreed. "It's about exposure." Richard, when informed, didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. "There are players you don't see when you operate at this level," he said calmly. "Orion was visible. This one isn't." "Who?" Adrien demanded. Richard's eyes sharpened. "Those who financed my early expansions." The room went still. "You mean private equity?" Elena asked. "No," Richard replied evenly. "I mean private power." 25 years ago, when Valley Industries was still volatile, Richard had accepted backing from a discreet consortium. Not banks, not institutions. Families. Old money, transnational, silent. They funded him, accelerated him, shielded him. In exchange, influence, not daily control, but veto power over destabilizing decisions. "Structural reform," Richard said slowly, "was never part of the agreement." Adrien's stomach tightened. "You never mentioned this. You were never meant to dismantle the structure. And now?" Richard looked directly at Elena. "Now you've introduced unpredictability." Within 48 hours, it happened. Not an attack, an invitation. A formal letter delivered physically, heavy cream paper, embossed seal, requesting the presence of Adrien Hale and Elena Navarro at a private summit. Location, Geneva. Date, immediate. No signature, just an emblem. A crest none of them recognized. Elena ran her fingers over the paper. "This feels medieval." Richard's expression was unreadable. "It is." They went. Not because they trusted it, but because refusing would signal weakness. The meeting took place in a private estate overlooking Lake Geneva. Minimal security visible, which meant security was everywhere. Inside the main hall, 5 individuals sat at a long table. 3 men, 2 women, ages indeterminate, expressions neutral. One of them spoke first. "You've destabilized a 25-year equilibrium." Adrien didn't sit. Equilibrium built on silence and manipulated collapse. The woman at the far end observed Elena closely. "You are the variable." Elena met her gaze steadily. "I am the consequence." A flicker of something like approval passed across the woman's face. The consortium's position was simple. Reform threatened predictability. Predictability secured long-term capital flow. Capital flow ensured generational wealth. Adrien's transparency initiatives and Elena's restitution foundation introduced volatility. Volatility reduced confidence in aligned global portfolios. "You are correcting morally," one member said calmly. "But disrupting structurally." Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "So your solution is what? Silence again?" "No," the woman replied. "Containment." The word echoed like a ghost of Richard's philosophy. Adrien's voice turned glacial. "That era is over." "Nothing is over," another man replied evenly. "We financed the foundation beneath your empire." "And," Adrien challenged, "and foundations can be withdrawn." Back in New York, markets began reacting strangely. Not crashes, not spikes. Subtle liquidity shifts, credit lines tightened, institutional hesitations surfaced, invisible pressure. Richard watched the indicators and felt something he hadn't in years. Loss of control. "This is capital suffocation," he said quietly. Eleanor understood immediately. "They won't attack publicly." "No," Adrien replied. "They'll starve us." Over the next week, Vale Industries faced quiet resistance, delayed approvals, increased audit scrutiny, partnership hesitations, all legal, all explainable, all coordinated. The consortium wasn't emotional, they were mathematical. Eleanor stood in Adrien's office one night after another 12-hour day. "If we reverse reform temporarily, they ease pressure." "Yes," Adrien said. "And if we don't?" "We force them into visibility." She studied him carefully. "That's dangerous." "Yes." "But necessary?" He nodded once. She walked closer. "You're not fighting for control anymore." "No." "For what then?" He didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, "For a future that isn't negotiated in back rooms." Richard requested to join the next strategy meeting. He no longer opposed them, he advised. "They believe endurance wins," he said calmly. "They've outlasted governments." "Then we don't outlast," Eleanor replied. Richard looked at her carefully. "What do you propose?" She inhaled slowly. "Radical transparency." Adrien's eyes sharpened. "You mean full disclosure?" "Yes." "Consortium funding, legacy agreements, historical manipulations, all of it, public. Markets would react violently, but sunlight destabilizes hidden power." Richard stared at her for a long moment. "That will damage us." "Yes," she said softly, "but it will free us." Silence. Then Adrien made his decision. Do it. The announcement was seismic. Vale Industries released a comprehensive report detailing historic funding structures, legacy agreements, and structural obligations inherited from prior leadership. Names weren't exposed recklessly, but mechanisms were. The media erupted. Financial historians called it unprecedented. Market volatility spiked sharply, but something unexpected followed. Public confidence surged. Investors who valued ethical reform flooded in. Not traditional capital, new capital, aligned capital. The consortium reacted, not with rage, with recalculation. Within 72 hours, pressure eased. Credit lines reopened, liquidity normalized, not because they surrendered. Because exposure reduced leverage. Power prefers darkness. Back in Geneva, the consortium reconvened privately. "The boy chose disruption," one member observed. "No," the woman corrected softly. "The girl did. And? She is not destabilizing. She is redefining stability." Silence. Then the oldest among them spoke. "Withdraw strategic pressure. Observe. They had lost this round. But not the game." Weeks later, Vale Industries stabilized fully. Not as it was. Something new. Board structure reformed. Founder voting power permanently diluted. Restitution foundation operational. Adrien stood in the now renovated boardroom. Glass walls, open architecture, no shadows. Elena entered quietly. "It feels different," she said. "It is." He stepped closer. "For the first time, I don't feel like I'm defending something inherited." "What do you feel?" "Like I'm building something chosen." She smiled faintly. "And us?" He didn't hesitate. "We were never strategy, never leverage, never contingency." He reached for her hand. "We were the disruption. Months ago, that word meant threat. Now it meant evolution." Richard watched from his estate, quieter now, not defeated, transformed. He had built through fear. They rebuilt through exposure, different eras, different definitions of strength. He poured a drink, but didn't raise it. Instead, he picked up his phone. A short message to Adrien. "You were right. No signature needed." 1 year later, Vale Industries had not collapsed. It had adapted. The foundation had compensated hundreds of families from past collapses. Transparency became competitive advantage. And the consortium? They remained. Watching, calculating, but no longer suffocating, because unpredictability had proven resilient. On the rooftop where it once felt like war, Adrien and Eleanor stood again. The city shimmered beneath them. No crisis alerts, no hostile bids, no secret files. Just quiet. "Do you ever regret knowing?" he asked softly. She considered it. "Truth rearranged my life. Mine too. Would you go back?" He shook his head. "No." She stepped closer. "Neither would I." Silence settled between them. Not tense, earned. The cold CEO had fallen, not into weakness, into evolution. And the woman who could have destroyed him had rebuilt him instead. Not because of blood, not because of power, but because both of them chose disruption over inheritance. And in the world of empires, that is the rarest form of strength. The silence between them was no longer about power, it was about choice. Ethan did not move immediately. He simply stood there, watching Isabella as if she were the only variable in an equation he could no longer control. "You think I don't see it?" she asked quietly. "See what?" "The way you're trying not to feel." The words landed harder than any accusation. Ethan rarely lost negotiations, he rarely lost sleep. He rarely lost control, but he was losing ground with her. And the worst part? He wasn't even fighting it. The trap tightens. Unknown to both of them, Victor Hale was no longer playing from a distance. He had found the thread, and he was pulling it slowly. The anonymous tip that reached Isabella's email the next morning was precise. Attached were internal financial documents from Blackthorn Holdings, not falsified, not fabricated, real and damning. She stared at the screen, her pulse racing. If these numbers were authentic, Ethan wasn't just ruthless, he was complicit in something catastrophic. And if she exposed it, Blackthorn Holdings would collapse. So would he. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "You always were curious, Ms. Laurent," a smooth voice said. "Curiosity can be very profitable." "Who is this?" "A friend." She didn't believe that for a second. "What do you want?" "Justice," he said softly, "and perhaps a little chaos." The line went dead. Isabella's heart pounded. She had the documents, she had the leverage, and now she had confirmation. Someone wanted her to use them. Ethan's realization. Across the city, Ethan was already sensing movement. His cybersecurity team had detected an internal breach. Someone had accessed archived financial structures. Someone had copied restricted files, and that someone had done it with surgical precision. This wasn't random, his CTO said. They knew exactly where to look. Ethan's jaw tightened. Victor, it had to be. But Victor didn't act without layers. If he had released documents to the press, the damage would be immediate. Instead, he sent them to Isabella. That meant one thing. He wanted her involved. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Victor wasn't just attacking his company. He was attacking his one weakness. Her. Confrontation. That evening, Ethan showed up at Isabella's apartment unannounced. She opened the door slowly. "You shouldn't be here. Do you have the documents?" Her breath caught, so he knew. "I don't know what you're talking about." He stepped closer. "Isabella." There was no anger in his voice, only urgency. "Whatever you received," he continued, "you're being manipulated." Her expression hardened. "Or maybe I'm finally seeing the truth." He froze. "Do you believe that?" She didn't answer, because she didn't know. That was the worst part. The truth beneath the numbers. They sat at her kitchen table. Laptop open. Documents spread. Ethan reviewed each page carefully. Not defensive, not dismissive, careful. "These numbers are real," he admitted. Her stomach dropped. "But they're incomplete." He opened archived compliance reports, cross-referenced transfers, highlighted amendments. "Victor restructured these investments 5 years ago when he was still on the board," Ethan explained. "He created offshore pathways. I shut them down after I took control. But the damage was his." She looked at him sharply. "And you never reported it?" "I dismantled it quietly. Public scandal would have destroyed thousands of employees. I chose containment." She studied his face. He wasn't lying. She had interviewed enough executives to know the tells. He wasn't deflecting, he was confessing. Not to a crime, but to a compromise. You protected the company, she said softly. I protected people, he corrected. And yourself. A pause. Yes. Honesty again. Raw, unpolished, terrifying. The real manipulation. Her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. Have you confronted him yet? She showed Ethan. His eyes darkened. He's watching. How? He always watches. Victor wasn't interested in exposing corruption. He wanted emotional detonation. If Isabella turned on Ethan, he would fracture. If she defended Ethan, she would lose her credibility. Victor had created a win-win scenario for himself. Unless they refused to play separately. An unlikely alliance. You should publish them, Ethan said suddenly. She stared at him. What? Expose the structure, but expose all of it, including Victor. Her heart pounded. You're asking me to risk your empire. I'm asking you to end this. He leaned closer. If you don't, he'll keep escalating. He'll drag you deeper. He'll make you doubt everything. She swallowed. And what if publishing destroys you? A faint, almost ironic smile touched his lips. Then at least it won't be you who destroys me. The air between them shifted. Something fragile and dangerous. Something far more powerful than power. Trust. The breaking point. Victor wasn't prepared for unity. He was prepared for betrayal. When the investigative article went live, it was explosive. Isabella didn't just publish the documents, she dismantled them. She traced every shell company back to Victor Hale. She cited compliance audits. She included Ethan's internal reforms. She told the entire story. Not the convenient half, the whole truth. Markets trembled, news outlets erupted. Victor's name trended globally within hours. But that night, he sent one final message. To Isabella. You chose him. 3 words. Cold. Final. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned off her phone and looked at Ethan. This isn't over. No, he agreed. It's not. The moment they almost lost. The fallout was immediate. Victor filed lawsuits. Anonymous sources accused Ethan of orchestrating the exposé. Board members panicked. Investors hesitated. And for the first time since inheriting the company, Ethan's control genuinely slipped. He didn't show fear publicly. But Isabella saw it in the way his shoulders tightened. When he thought no one was looking, she stepped closer. You can still walk away, he said quietly. This will get worse before it gets better. She shook her head. You think I stayed because it was safe? He looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't trembling, she wasn't uncertain. She had made her choice. Not because she was manipulated, not because she was naive, because she saw him, and he saw her. The confession. It happened without ceremony, without dramatic music, without fireworks. Just 2 people standing too close in a city that never slowed down. I tried not to feel this, Ethan admitted. I know. I don't know how to do this. You don't have to control it, she whispered. He laughed softly. That might be the first thing in my life I can't control. Good. He touched her face gently, carefully, as if she were something rare and breakable. But she wasn't breakable. She was strong enough to destroy him, and he trusted her not to. When he kissed her, it wasn't possessive. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't calculated. It was surrender. The false calm. For a few weeks, the storm quieted. Victor's legal pressure stalled. Regulators began investigating his offshore structures. Blackthorn stabilized. Public opinion shifted. Ethan and Isabella learned each other slowly. Morning coffee arguments, late-night strategy sessions, small, unguarded laughter. It felt almost normal, almost safe, which meant it wouldn't last. Because Victor Hale did not accept defeat. He studied patterns, he anticipated moves, and when he realized emotional manipulation had failed, he pivoted. The new threat. A government inquiry opened unexpectedly, not into Victor, into Ethan. Charges of insider knowledge regarding the offshore dismantling, accusations that he delayed reporting intentionally, technically defensible, morally ambiguous, legally dangerous. Victor had found the angle. He didn't need Isabella to destroy Ethan, he just needed the system to do it, and systems were far colder than any CEO. Isabella stood in the courthouse hallway, watching reporters gather. Ethan adjusted his cufflinks calmly. "You don't have to be here," he told her again. She stepped beside him. "Yes, I do." Cameras flashed, questions shouted, speculation exploded, but through the chaos, their eyes locked. This was no longer about business. It wasn't even about revenge, it was about endurance, about whether love could survive power, about whether trust could survive pressure. Victor thought he had engineered the perfect collapse, but he underestimated one thing. When two people stop fearing each other, they become unstoppable. The trial of control. The courtroom felt less like a place of justice and more like a theater of precision. Ethan Blackthorne sat upright, expression unreadable, as if he were attending a quarterly board meeting instead of facing a potential indictment. Isabella watched from the gallery, fingers interlocked so tightly they had turned pale. The prosecutor stood. Mr. Blackthorne had knowledge of illicit offshore structures tied to Blackthorne Holdings and failed to report them to regulatory authorities in a timely manner. Every word was sharp, clean, designed to wound. Ethan did not flinch, because technically, they were right. He had known. He had dismantled the network internally. He had avoided a public scandal. He had chosen containment over exposure. The difference between strategy and crime now rested in interpretation. Victor had crafted the trap beautifully, not a direct attack, a moral dilemma weaponized. Isabella's doubt. That night, Isabella stood alone in her apartment. The city lights below looked like scattered stars trapped in concrete. She replayed every conversation with Ethan, every confession, every pause. Had he told her everything or only enough? Her phone vibrated. Unknown number again. She didn't need to answer. A message appeared instead. Truth always comes in layers. Attached was a photograph. Ethan, 6 years ago. In a private meeting with Victor. Date stamped weeks after he claimed to have dismantled the offshore structures. Her breath hitched. Why hadn't he mentioned that meeting? The seed of doubt didn't need much soil. Victor knew that. The quiet confrontation. She didn't accuse him immediately. She waited. She watched. When Ethan arrived later that evening, exhausted but composed, she handed him her phone. He studied the image. His jaw tightened. "You met him after you shut it down," she said softly. "Yes." "You didn't tell me." He inhaled slowly. "I went to demand he sign a formal resignation agreement. I wanted legal insulation for the company." "And?" He refused. "Why didn't you say that?" "Because I didn't think it mattered." Her eyes sharpened. "It matters if I'm standing in a courtroom defending your integrity." Silence. Heavy. Dense. "You think I'm hiding something," he said. "I think you're used to controlling narratives." That landed. Harder than any prosecutor's statement. Victor's endgame revealed. Across the city, Victor Hale poured himself a drink. He wasn't celebrating. Not yet. He had studied Ethan for years. Brilliant, controlled, strategic, but emotionally inexperienced. Victor understood something Ethan did not. Love amplifies fear, and fear distorts judgment. He didn't need Isabella to leave Ethan. He just needed her to hesitate at the wrong moment. One miscalculated decision in court. One emotional crack in testimony. And Ethan's empire would fracture permanently. Victor smiled faintly. The most elegant battles are won without raising your voice. The breaking of illusions. The next day, the prosecution introduced a surprise witness. Former compliance officer. Nervous. Sweating. "Did Mr. Blackthorne explicitly instruct you not to report the offshore discrepancies immediately?" A pause. The room held its breath. "Yes." Gasps rippled. Isabella's stomach dropped. Ethan's face remained composed, but his fingers tightened slightly against the table. It wasn't a lie. He had instructed delay, not concealment, delay, to restructure, to protect employees, to avoid market collapse. But nuance rarely survives headlines. The choice. That evening, Isabella sat with her laptop open. She still had access, still had influence, still had the power to shape public narrative. If she published a piece now defending Ethan fully, it could sway opinion. But if more evidence surfaced contradicting him, her credibility would evaporate. She had built her career on truth, uncompromised, untouchable. Victor's earlier words echoed. Truth always comes in layers. Her screen reflected her own conflicted expression. Was she standing beside a misunderstood strategist, or a man who believed his judgment was above consequence? The door opened softly behind her. Ethan stepped in. "I won't ask you to defend me," he said. She didn't turn around. "I don't need you to." That hurt him more than accusation, the real confession. He walked closer. "There's something I didn't tell you," he admitted. Now she turned. "When I discovered Victor's offshore system, I could have reported it immediately." She waited. "I didn't. Not just because of the employees, not just because of market stability." "Why then?" "Because if the scandal broke publicly, I would have lost control of the board. And if I lost control, Victor would have found a way back in. The truth, unfiltered. He had protected the company, he had protected the employees, and yes, he had protected his own power. I chose what I believed was the lesser catastrophe," he continued quietly. "But I did choose. No excuses, no manipulation, just ownership." Her anger softened into something more complicated. Understanding. "That's not villainy," she said slowly. "It's human." He exhaled, tension leaving him for the first time in days. "I don't know how to separate those two anymore." Victor's miscalculation. The next court session shifted unexpectedly. Ethan's legal team presented archived communication logs, encrypted board discussions, evidence that Victor had attempted to reacquire voting shares through shell proxies even after resignation. Motive, clear, calculated. The courtroom's temperature changed. The narrative began tilting. Victor hadn't anticipated one factor, Ethan's willingness to expose his own imperfection publicly. Instead of denying the delay, Ethan admitted it, explained it, accepted responsibility for the risk, but positioned it within a larger defensive strategy against Victor's attempted corporate re-entry. Transparency. It disarmed suspicion, because manipulation thrives in secrecy, not in confession. Isabella's realization. Watching him speak under oath, Isabella understood something profound. Ethan wasn't fighting to preserve his image. He was fighting to prevent Victor from regaining influence, even if it meant damaging himself in the process. That wasn't cold ambition. That was protection. The realization settled deep inside her. Victor's manipulation had depended on fracture, but Ethan had chosen vulnerability instead, and vulnerability is unpredictable. Victor's system of control had one fatal flaw. It assumed everyone valued power above integrity. Ethan did not. Not anymore. The countermove that night, Isabella made her move. She published an investigative deep dive, not a defense piece, not an attack, a full chronology. Victor's offshore creation, Ethan's internal dismantling, the delayed reporting, the legal ambiguity, the board power struggle, every layer. She left nothing out, and she ended with one sentence. Sometimes leadership is not about choosing what is clean, it is about choosing what collapses least. The article exploded, not as scandal, but as complexity. Public perception shifted again. Ethan was no longer seen as untouchable. He was seen as flawed, human, strategic, and dangerously honest. Victor corners himself. Victor read the article in silence. His mistake crystallized. He had assumed Ethan would deny, deflect, or hide. Instead, Ethan stepped into imperfection openly. Victor's weaponized doubt lost sharpness, because doubt requires concealment to survive. He crushed the glass in his hand without noticing. This wasn't over, but for the first time he felt something unfamiliar, uncertainty, the night before the verdict. Ethan stood on the balcony of his penthouse. The city stretched endlessly. Isabella joined him. No words at first, just shared gravity. "If I lose control of the company tomorrow," he said quietly, "I won't lose because of you." She looked at him. "And if you win?" He turned slightly. "Then I start building something different." "Different how?" "Without secrets." A faint smile touched her lips. That sounds terrifying for you. It is. He took her hand. For a man who had once built empires on calculated silence, that gesture was seismic. No board, no cameras, no strategy, just choice. The verdict. The courtroom was unnaturally quiet, not the usual murmur of whispers and shuffling papers. This silence felt engineered, compressed, like the air before lightning splits it open. Ethan stood when instructed. Isabella felt it in her chest before the judge even spoke. Every decision Ethan had ever made was about control, market control, narrative control, risk control. This was the first moment in years where he controlled absolutely nothing. The judge reviewed the findings, acknowledged the delay in reporting, recognized the internal dismantling of the offshore structures, recognized the documented evidence of Victor Hale's attempt to manipulate board re-entry through proxies. A pause. The entire room held its breath. Mr. Blackthorne's actions demonstrate a failure in immediate regulatory transparency. However, evidence shows proactive internal corrective measures and lack of personal financial gain tied to the offshore structures. Another pause. In light of these findings, the court rules that while regulatory fines will be imposed upon Blackthorne Holdings, no criminal liability will be assigned to Mr. Ethan Blackthorne. The sound that followed wasn't applause. It was release, a collective exhale. Isabella didn't realize she had tears in her eyes until she blinked. Ethan didn't smile. He simply nodded once, as if acknowledging a completed negotiation. But this wasn't victory. It was survival. The price of survival. Outside, cameras exploded in flashes. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Blackthorne, do you consider this a vindication? Is this the end of the Hale conflict? Will you step down as CEO? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked at Isabella first. That glance said more than any statement. Then he faced the press. This ruling does not erase mistakes, he said calmly. It clarifies intent. Blackthorne Holdings will comply fully with all regulatory recommendations and will initiate independent oversight reforms effective immediately. No triumph, no ego, measured accountability. Victor watched the broadcast from his office. His jaw tightened. He had expected outrage. He had expected emotional collapse. He had expected Ethan to lash out. Instead, Ethan absorbed the impact and repositioned. Victor had lost the legal battlefield, but he still had one weapon left. The final card. 3 days later, the board of Blackthorne Holdings received an anonymous acquisition proposal, hostile, aggressive, backed by a private investment coalition, majority share purchase, conditional removal of current executive leadership. Ethan. Victor could not destroy him legally, so he would erase him structurally. Isabella read the proposal twice, then a third time. This is him, she said. Ethan nodded. Yes. You can fight it. I can delay it, he corrected. But if enough shareholders panic, they'll sell. Victor understood fear economics. Markets don't need certainty to move, they need doubt, and he had planted plenty. The Fracture Point board members began requesting emergency sessions, some loyal, some nervous, some calculating their own exit strategies. Ethan remained outwardly composed. Inside, something shifted. For the first time, he considered walking away. Not because he was defeated, but because he was tired. Tired of defending, tired of countering, tired of living inside a battlefield built by another man's obsession. Isabella saw it in him. You're thinking about letting it go, she said quietly one evening. He didn't deny it. If I fight this, it becomes endless. And if you don't, I lose the company. And who are you without it? The question wasn't accusatory. It was surgical. He didn't answer immediately, because for most of his life the answer had been simple. He was the company. Now it wasn't. Victor's offer. The meeting was arranged privately. Neutral territory. Victor entered with the same composed elegance he always wore like tailored armor. Congratulations on surviving court, he said smoothly. You miscalculated, Ethan replied. Victor smiled faintly. No, I adapted. He placed a folder on the table. Inside was a finalized acquisition structure, guaranteed board majority, removal clause. However, Victor leaned back slightly. There is an alternative. Ethan's eyes didn't move from him. Resign voluntarily, Victor continued. Publicly, gracefully. Retain a substantial financial stake. Avoid market panic. I assume control. And in exchange, your name remains untarnished. Isabella's career remains intact. The narrative becomes strategic transition rather than forced exile. There it was. The real threat. Not money, not power. Her. Victor had learned something. If he could not fracture their trust, he could weaponize protection. The turning point. That night, Ethan told Isabella everything. Every word of the offer. Every implication. He thinks I'll sacrifice control to protect you, Ethan said. And will you? She asked. He stepped closer. For most of my life, I would have chosen power. A pause. But power that requires abandoning who I've become isn't power. It's regression. Her heartbeat slowed. You're not alone in this, she said. I know. That was the difference. Victor still operated on isolation. Divide, pressure, conquer. But Ethan was no longer alone. The counterstrike. Instead of rejecting the offer privately, Ethan did something Victor didn't anticipate. He went public. A press conference, live broadcast, board members in attendance. Isabella standing off to the side, silent but present. Ethan addressed the acquisition attempt directly. He revealed the coalition structure. He traced the investment back to Shell intermediaries connected to Victor's former offshore architecture. Not illegal, but ethically corrosive. Then he did something seismic. I will not resign, he said calmly. However, I will initiate a shareholder vote on executive term limits, including my own position. Murmurs erupted. Victor, watching from his office, went still. Ethan continued. If shareholders believe new leadership serves the company better, I will step down without contest. It was bold, transparent, terrifying, because it removed Victor's ability to frame the narrative. Now the decision would not be forced through panic. It would be deliberate, public, measured. Victor had built his strategy on pressure and shadow. Ethan dragged it into light. The vote. The weeks leading up to the shareholder vote were brutal. Media debates, financial speculation, market fluctuations. Isabella endured attacks on her credibility again. Anonymous blogs resurfaced old rumors. Victor was relentless. But something unexpected happened. Employees began speaking publicly. Senior managers published internal letters. Independent analysts praised Ethan's regulatory reforms post-scandal. Transparency, once his liability, became his shield. The day of the vote arrived. Ethan stood before the board, composed but not distant. Results were tallied. Majority support. He retained his position. Victor's coalition failed to secure controlling shares, not by a landslide, but decisively enough. Victor had lost structurally. The aftermath. For the first time in years, silence followed conflict. No immediate counterattack, no new scandal. Victor disappeared from public view, strategic retreat, or recalibration. Ethan stood in his office that evening, city lights below him once again, but something had changed. The office felt less like a throne, more like a responsibility. Isabella entered quietly. It's over, she said. He shook his head slightly. No, it's transformed. She smiled. Is that how you measure peace? I'm learning. He walked toward her, slowly, not as a CEO, not as a strategist, as a man who had nearly lost everything. I used to think strength was control, he said softly. Now I think it's choosing what to protect. And what do you choose? He didn't hesitate. You. No calculation. No hesitation. Just certainty. The quiet victory. Months later, Blackthorn Holdings announced a restructuring initiative, independent oversight committee, board diversification, transparency protocols. It wasn't just optics. It was evolution. Victor's war had forced Ethan to become something different, not softer, but deeper, more accountable, more human. And Isabella? She continued investigating power structures, but this time she wasn't standing outside them. She understood their weight, their fragility, their cost. One evening, standing on that same balcony where everything had once felt uncertain, she looked at him and said, "You realize we survived something most people don't?" He nodded. "Yes." "Do you regret it?" He considered. "If I had never met you, I would still be untouchable. And I would also still be alone." The city moved beneath them, unaware of the war that had just ended, or perhaps merely paused, because power never disappears. It waits. And somewhere in another office, in another city, Victor Hale was not finished building. But neither were they, and this time, whatever came next, they would face it together. The calm before the real storm. 3 months, 3 quiet months. No lawsuits, no hostile acquisitions, no anonymous leaks. Too quiet. Ethan noticed it first. "Victor doesn't disappear," he said one night, staring at the skyline. "He recalibrates." Isabella felt it too, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The kind of silence that feels less like peace and more like surveillance. Then the call came, not from the press, not from regulators, from someone neither of them expected. Eleanor Vale. Helena's revelation. Helena had remained peripheral through most of the conflict. Observant, reserved, always measured. Now her voice trembled slightly through the secure line. "You need to see something. Both of you, in person." They met her in a private office after hours. She placed a tablet on the table and pressed play. Security footage, dated 8 years ago. Victor Hale meeting not just with offshore intermediaries, but with someone else. The screen froze. Isabella leaned forward. "That's Richard Vale." Helena closed her eyes briefly. "My father." The room shifted temperature. Richard Vale had publicly distanced himself from Victor during the early board conflicts. He had presented himself as neutral, even supportive of Ethan's leadership transition. But the footage was undeniable. Private coordination, pre-scandal, pre-dismantling. "Victor didn't build the offshore network alone," Helena said quietly. "My father helped architect it." Ethan's pulse slowed into something dangerously calm. "And you're only telling us now?" Helena's gaze hardened. "Because I just found it." The real architecture of power. The offshore structures had never been just about hidden capital. They had been about leverage, long-term leverage, board leverage, regulatory leverage, political leverage. Victor wasn't trying to steal the company recently. He was trying to activate something that had been designed years ago. A contingency, a failsafe, a buried detonator. Isabella scrolled through the recovered files. There were coded agreements tied to a dormant trust. Majority share reallocation clause triggered under specific corporate distress signals. One of those signals, a CEO removal vote, the very vote Ethan had survived. Victor had wanted the vote, not to win it, to trigger something else. The twist unfolds. Helena zoomed into a section of the document. If executive leadership faces public regulatory challenge and shareholder instability within a 24-month window, Ethan finished the line quietly, voting shares temporarily consolidate under the Vale Strategic Trust. Silence. Richard Vale's trust. Helena's family trust. Victor had engineered a scenario where chaos alone was enough to shift structural control, not permanently, temporarily. But temporarily was enough. "Why didn't it activate?" Isabella asked. Helena swallowed. "Because the trust requires dual authorization." "From who?" "My father." A beat. "And me." The air went razor thin. Victor's final move. The next morning, financial markets erupted. An announcement. Richard Vale had suffered a sudden cardiac event overnight, hospitalized, unresponsive. Simultaneously, a legal notice was filed invoking emergency trust review provisions. Victor wasn't waiting for recovery, he was accelerating. If Richard was incapacitated and Helena signed under emergency governance protocol, control would shift, not to Victor directly, but through trust mechanisms he influenced. It was elegant, ruthless, patient. Ethan looked at Helena. "Did your father know about this clause?" "Yes." "Did you?" "No." Victor had planned for resistance. He had planned for exposure. He had planned for defeat. What he had not planned for was Helena discovering the architecture before he could pressure her privately, because the pressure was coming. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She didn't need to answer. A message appeared. Sign, and your family legacy remains intact. The breaking of alliances. Helena stood by the window, shaken. If I refuse, the trust collapses publicly, she said. My father's reputation is destroyed. Everything we built, gone. Isabella stepped closer. And if you sign? Helena looked at Ethan. Victor effectively controls the board for at least 12 months. Long enough to dismantle everything Ethan had rebuilt. Long enough to erase reforms. Long enough to restore shadow governance. Victor had turned the battlefield into a moral paradox. Family versus integrity. Legacy versus transparency. Protection versus truth. Ethan's voice was calm. You don't owe me loyalty, he said to Helena. You owe yourself clarity. She stared at him. You would let me destroy your position? If the alternative is you destroying your conscience, yes. That was not strategy. That was evolution. The unexpected counter Isabella's mind was racing. Victor was counting on private pressure, emotional coercion, secrecy. So she chose the opposite. Go public, she said suddenly. Both Ethan and Helena turned to her. Before he activates the clause, she continued, expose the trust structure, the contingency plan, the timing of your father's hospitalization relative to the filing. Helena hesitated. That would ignite a scandal. Yes, Isabella said, but it ignites it on your terms. Victor thrived in shadow. He suffocated in light. Ethan understood instantly. If the clause is activated under public scrutiny, regulators will freeze structural consolidation pending investigation. Helena's breathing steadied. You're asking me to risk my family name. Isabella met her eyes. No, I'm asking you to define it. The broadcast. That evening, Helena Vale stood in front of cameras, composed, unflinching. She disclosed the existence of the dormant trust, the contingency clause, the emergency filing. She confirmed her father's condition but refused to speculate on cause, and she ended with, I will not authorize any structural consolidation until a full independent investigation determines intent behind this mechanism. Markets reacted instantly. Regulatory agencies announced provisional oversight. The trust activation froze. Victor's move stalled. For the first time, his design was exposed mid-execution. The final reveal. But Victor was not done. Hours after Helena's statement, a final document surfaced. Encrypted. Time released. Signed 8 years ago. By Ethan. Isabella felt her pulse spike. The document acknowledged awareness of the Vale Strategic Trust's contingency framework. Not its activation, but its existence. Ethan stared at the signature. Yes, he said quietly. I knew the trust existed. Why didn't you tell us? Isabella asked. Because at the time, I believed it was neutralized when we restructured voting distribution. Victor had saved this, his final weapon. Not proof of guilt, proof of omission. And omission erodes trust. Exactly what he needed. The moment of truth. Isabella looked at Ethan. Not accusing, not wounded, just searching. Did you underestimate it? She asked softly. Or did you ignore it? The question was precise, because the difference mattered. He met her gaze. I underestimated Victor, a beat, and I underestimated the cost of incomplete transparency. There it was again. No deflection, no excuse, just truth. Helena exhaled slowly. If we survive this, she said, there will be no more hidden clauses. Ethan nodded. No more. Victor's silence. For the first time since the war began, Victor Hale did not respond publicly. No statement, no filing, no counterattack, because his greatest advantage had always been asymmetry. Now he was visible, investigated, watched, his moves limited by exposure. He had not lost entirely, but he had lost invisibility. And for a man like Victor, that was catastrophic. The new reality regulators launched a joint investigation into the trust's design and timing. Helena retained her refusal. Ethan voluntarily disclosed all historical documents. Isabella documented everything, not as a weapon, but as record. The war had transformed again, not CEO versus rival, not lovers under pressure, but three individuals choosing light over leverage. Standing on the balcony weeks later, Isabella leaned into Ethan. "This isn't over," she said. "No," he agreed, "but it's no longer hidden." Power had shifted, not because Victor vanished, but because his architecture was no longer secret. And the most dangerous weapon in the world is a system no one sees. Now they saw it, and so did everyone else. The illusion of victory. The investigation into the Vale Strategic Trust dragged on for weeks. Regulators froze activation clauses. Financial analysts dissected 8-year-old board decisions. Victor remained publicly silent. Too silent. Ethan had learned to distrust quiet, but nothing moved. No leaks, no counterfilings, no shadow acquisitions. It felt finished. Almost disappointingly so. Then Helena received the call, not from regulators, not from the hospital, from a private legal firm in Zurich. Her father had regained consciousness, and he wanted to speak to her alone, immediately. The hospital room. The room smelled sterile and artificial. Richard Vale looked thinner, pale, but his eyes were clear. Too clear. Helena stood at his bedside, bracing herself. "I know about the trust," she said before he could speak. "I expected you would," he replied calmly. "You helped Victor build it." "Yes." No denial. No shame. Just confirmation. Helena's pulse pounded. "Why?" Richard studied her for a long moment. "Because Victor wasn't the architect." The words didn't land at first. Helena blinked. "What?" "Victor executed it, but he didn't conceive it." A pause. "You did." The fracture. Helena felt the room tilt. "That's impossible." Richard's voice remained steady. "You came to me 8 years ago, angry, frustrated, certain that Ethan Blackthorne was consolidating too much independent control too quickly." Fragments surfaced in her memory. Board meetings, power shifts, Ethan's rapid restructuring, her suspicion that he was sidelining legacy stakeholders. "I wanted safeguards," she whispered. "You wanted leverage," Richard corrected gently. "Insurance." Helena staggered back a step. "No, I never—" "You asked what would happen if Ethan ever became a liability. You asked if there was a way to prevent total centralization." Victor had overheard. Victor had volunteered to operationalize. Victor had built the offshore complexity around a seed she planted. Helena's breath fractured. "I didn't mean for it to become this." "You never do," Richard said quietly. The true manipulator across the city, Isabella reviewed archived communications again. Patterns began emerging. The trust clause predated Victor's aggressive maneuvers. It originated in a board proposal draft authored by Helena Vale. Modified later by Victor, expanded, weaponized, but conceived by her. Isabella's stomach tightened. The war hadn't been Victor versus Ethan. It had been systemic, legacy versus reform, fear versus consolidation. Victor was opportunistic, but Helena had created the foundation, the confrontation. No one expected they met in Ethan's office. No cameras, no board members, just the three of them. Helena stood still, composed but hollowed. "I didn't know it would evolve into this," she said. Ethan didn't speak immediately. "You questioned my consolidation," he said finally. "Yes." "You didn't trust me." "No." That part was honest, raw, uncomfortable. Victor had exploited her doubt, fed it, magnified it, built his empire of revenge on it. But the first domino, it wasn't his, it was hers. The rewriting of blame. Isabella stepped forward. "You weren't trying to destroy him," she said carefully. "You were trying to protect your influence." Helena's eyes shimmered faintly. "Yes, and when Victor offered to operationalize the safeguard, I thought it would stay dormant." Ethan exhaled slowly. "This entire war started because none of us trusted transparency." Silence. Heavy. Transformative. Victor hadn't invented chaos. He had inherited insecurity and scaled it. The final shock. Just as the truth settled into its devastating clarity, Ethan's phone vibrated. Encrypted number. He answered. Victor's voice was calm. You found out? No denial. No panic. You built it on her fear, Ethan said quietly. I built it on opportunity, Victor corrected. A faint exhale over the line. You're all blaming the wrong variable. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Victor chuckled softly. You think the trust was the end game? A pause. The trust was distraction. Cold realization flooded the room. Victor continued. While you were fighting over board control, you failed to notice the asset transfer. Isabella's fingers flew over her tablet. She accessed live trading data. Her blood ran cold. A subsidiary, one of Blackthorn's most valuable emerging tech divisions, gradually spun off, legally, over 2 years, transferred through minority acquisitions, now majority owned by a Zurich-based holding company, registered 3 months ago. Director listed anonymously, but the capital trail was unmistakable. Victor Hale, the checkmate that wasn't about power. He hadn't been trying to seize the throne. He had been dismantling the kingdom piece by piece, strategically, patiently, while everyone fought over governance structure. He siphoned the future, the most innovative branch, the growth engine, gone, legally acquired, unstoppable. You were never the target, Victor said softly over the line. Your company was. Ethan's jaw tightened. You just admitted intent. No, Victor replied smoothly. I executed market opportunity. Click. The line went dead. The redefinition silence consumed the office. Helena's revelation now felt secondary. The trust battle, the courtroom, the vote, all smoke. Victor had used chaos as camouflage, and they had walked directly into it. Isabella looked at Ethan. For the first time since they met, he looked shaken, not by legal threat, not by scandal, but by strategic defeat. He outplayed the board, Helena whispered. No, Ethan said slowly, he outplayed distraction. The final scene weeks later, press releases confirmed the spin-off. Blackthorn Holdings remained powerful, but diminished. Victor's new company announced a breakthrough innovation partnership. Global headlines praised his visionary pivot. He had rewritten the narrative. Again, Ethan stood alone in his office late one night. Isabella joined him. Do you feel defeated? She asked softly. He considered. No. She waited. I feel awakened. Power, he realized, was not about holding position. It was about anticipating silence. And Victor had mastered silence. For now. Ethan turned to Isabella. This isn't the end. No, she agreed. It's a reset. In Zurich, Victor stood before a wall of glass overlooking a different skyline. He watched financial feeds scroll across multiple screens. He did not smile. He simply adjusted a file labeled Phase 2. Final line. The war for control was never about who ruled the company. It was about who understood the future first. And now, the future belonged to the one who had been planning all along. In a federal holding facility, Marcus Whitmore smiled.